Shalom, I'm Rabbi Gail Schuster-Buskila, and you see me here before the first cabinet that I'm going to begin to clean to get rid of all the chametz before Pesach. All of the leavening material, the bread, could be all different sorts of things, crackers, could be things that are made with leavening agents that I try to get rid of before Pesach. I'll be using my favorite sponge and spray and getting it all out. In a sense, it is connected to this week's Parashat Tazria, which is the fourth parasha in the book of Leviticus, because that parasha deals with ritual impurity. Now, chametz is not a bad thing all year long. We enjoy it. But for the reason of Exodus 12, verses 15 to 20, we are not supposed to have it during Pesach. As a matter of fact, after childbirth, how is a woman impure in Tazria? It's the blood. Now, they understood medical situations much more differently than we do, certainly not scientifically. There really is not much difference between matzah and bread, if you think about the ingredients. But the fact of the matter is, traditionally, we have taken this chametz out because of those injunctions in the book of Exodus. Ritual impurity is dealt with in a variety of ways, but in the whole idea of what is pure and impure, we're not talking about good or bad. As a matter of fact, childbirth has always been encouraged. If you read the book of Genesis, you see that that's one of the things that is very encouraged. Be fruitful and multiply. And so essentially, this is not a bad thing. Just like chametz is not a bad thing. The idea of what is pure and impure is totally different now than then. So I'm going to get back to this in a little while, but I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about this whole idea of ritual impurity. We're on the Tazria portion from Leviticus on the Sefaria website. And here I've also opened up the commentary. Commentary can always be accessed, although not every portion has commentary, by clicking on the verse you're interested in. And I'm interested in the Rashi commentary about Tazria, because it talks about the fact that we are here dealing with what we call impurity or tum'ah, and this would require a woman to be separated out away from other people, and she could not go to the sanctuary until the end of the period of purification is completed. This is also the case, and in the same parasha, Parashat Tazria, we also have the beginning of the idea of what happens to a leper, and the fact that these people had to be separated out. And this was a very difficult problem, and that it was something that the priest would pronounce, and the person would be isolated. And that would be for a way of keeping this disease from spreading. Now, they didn't understand how diseases were spread. They didn't understand the blood that came after the birth. But what happened in both of these cases was that they were isolated. In my Midrash here, of course, this is my website for my Midrashim, Midrash.Harabah. I have for all the Torah portions. This Midrash I've entitled Solitary, which I was I wrote a very long time ago, and I don't think I understood the idea of quarantine as I do after the pandemic of the beginning of 2021. I do understand it now. The difference was As it says here in Leviticus 46, all of the days an impurity affects someone, that person shall be in quarantine, dwelling outside of the camp. We were stuck in our houses. These people had to go out, but the idea stayed the same. So my of keeping them separate. So my midrash begins this way. Lepers lived outside the confines of their neighborhood. Pity and compassion mixed with fear could be seen on the faces of our family and friends as they left their home. Nothing remains to look forward to until they could somehow be cleaned of this disease. So very close to widowhood, abandoned and alone on an open road under the searing sun, they would travel. There's more to my midrash, but I end this way. Could those ancient rituals and tribulations be like the constellations of stars in the night sky that guided ancient travelers? They might hold the clues to navigate safely in the darkness of our own plight. In Ecclesiastes, written way before the present pandemic had struck, verse 8 in chapter 7, the end of a matter is better than its beginning. Patience is better than haughtiness. Verse 10, don't say what came before in the early days is better than these days, because there is no wisdom in your query. And at the end, I have put a very famous song, The Sound of Silence, which of course reverberated to me when I wrote this midrash about being solitary, and reverberated again in the silent walls of my house during the quarantine days of the pandemic, COVID-19 or coronavirus. I have continued my theme of my gloves and my spray and my sponge that I use to clean for Pesach, but I connect it to the idea of ritual purity, which will be in this parasha, and is actually very, very important in Leviticus, and something that I probably only relate to at this time of year. And there is some sort of feeling, and I don't feel the feeling of danger if my house isn't pure for Pesach. I certainly didn't feel any danger of ritual impurity after giving birth. But I do feel that our ancestors had this fear. And that is why I'm reiterating this wonderful quote from Robert Alter. What goes along with this rigorous setting apart of sacred space is an anxious concern about contamination from the sphere of the profane. And if that isn't what it is, when we begin to clean for Pesach, maybe I do it because I have always done it, and it was done before me, and other people around me are doing it, and people who keep kosher are very appreciative that they can come and be in my house because they know that they can eat here. But it comes from a deeper feeling that that we have in the cult that requires us to do this cleaning because this is what is commanded in the Torah. But in the Leviticus, we also have another idea. And Jacob Milgram writes in his commentary on the book of Leviticus that, first of all, that it is a book of rituals and ethics. And he says, anthropology has taught us that when a society wishes to express and preserve its basic values, it ensconces them in rituals. How logical. Words fall from our lips like the dead leaves of autumn.
but rituals endure with repetition. They are visual and participatory. They embedded themselves in the memory at a young age, reinforced with each enactment. It's possible that I started cleaning for Pesach at a very young age. I'm not sure, but there's something about this ritual that when we come to the Seder evening, we are in a different place. We are in a place where we're beginning again, where we are getting ourselves away from what is past and into the new, just as our ancestors were supposed to have done at the Exodus, getting away from the old and into the new. Even Leviticus is trying to show how people could get from one state, which would have been considered by them impurity, to purity, something that people in those days really worried about.
Well, I really have to get back to work now. But before I do, I want to wish you a very restful Shabbat Tazria, whether you're doing spiritual or physical cleaning of chametz or both. Shabbat Shalom.